Wow. Good afternoon, Dr. Joy Roberts, and thank you for being here with us. I am so excited to be welcoming you to Sharing the Good with Dr. Denise Ball. I am honored to be hosting this conversation today. Today, we're continuing our Joy in the Work series, our discussion, where I have the privilege of inviting educators and leaders into conversation about something I believe matters very deeply on how do we create these environments where the people we serve can experience joy, belonging, purpose, and connection. Our first conversation invited us to lead with joy. Our second, make room for joy, including how do we create environments where people have the permission to learn, the permission to take risks, to make mistakes, to grow. Well, today we are taking that conversation one step further and exploring joy, belonging, and the power of community. And I am thrilled and delighted to welcome Dr. Joy Roberts. Joy comes to us as the co-founder and president of Frenzy, where she works with faith-based and public schools to strengthen school culture and to help create communities where students are known, valued, and connected. Joy is also a researcher, educator, and someone whose work continually reminds us of the importance of relationships. I always leave my conversations with you, Joy, inspired. So, Joy, thank you for being here today.
Denise, thank you for starting this conversation. I know you just picked me because my name is Joy. So
I do love
I
that.
I
But you're
so
full of joy. You live out your name.
oh, thank you. My dad would say that it would be a compliment. Denise, thank you for leading and spearheading this conversation across the country, for your intentionality with teachers and schools and educators. It is so meaningful. And when I think
Mhm.
about the connection between joy and belonging, there
Mhm.
is a deep connection. We flourish when we know that we are loved, when we're valuable, that when we don't show up, it actually matters, and that we have people that we're doing this work together with.
Mhm.
And what we know from the research that we have the opportunity to look at together um, is that that's true for students. The importance of belonging is so true for our students, but it's also so true for us as educators
Mhm.
and just humanity at large. I always talk about the fact that we're the most technologically connected generation that has ever existed, but we're the most socially disconnected.
Mhm.
And what that is doing is it's robbing us of joy. And I think belonging is a precursor to actually experiencing joy and human flourishing. So
Mhm.
excited to jump into this conversation and really unpack it together from our different lenses and
Aw.
perspectives.
Thank you, Joy. I think you are the perfect subject matter expert for this conversation, so I'm honored. When we look at diving in, I would like to ask you, I've been trying to ask each guest in the series a simple question. And given your name, it's always appropriate, I think. You're right. I love that your name is Joy, and every time I'm with you, I'm inspired and I feel that joy. Um, is where are you finding joy in the work right now? You personally.
Mhm. So, this is the time of year where so many of us in education have the opportunity to get together for professional learning, school
Mm,
tours. So, what is bringing me extreme joy right now in the work is the opportunity to get inside of the schools and to
mm,
stand shoulder to shoulder with the educators who are on the very front lines doing the work of impacting a generation of students.
mm.
And so over the last few
Powerful.
weeks, I've been in the classroom with educators. Some of the schools are filled with students, and some of the schools are preparing to open their doors to students to come in. Um, when we've been doing professional development, I've been in your beautiful state of Michigan, in Cadillac, Michigan, in a handful of schools in that neck of the woods, and
Mm,
recently in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And so reflecting on those two experiences that were different but the same, We often ask a question to educators: what do you want kids to know at the
Mm,
end of the school year? And so when we
yeah.
kind of let that sit, we actually do this QR code, and they scan in their answers. And it's always impressive to see what the teachers
Mm,
put. What is absent from their responses is reading comprehension and math facts. I always ask the teachers, are those things important? And they're like, absolutely. But what we see teachers say over and over about what they want students to know
mm,
is that they're loved, that they're cared for, that they're valuable, that they're confident, that God loves them. And so these are these things that are all rooted in this
mm,
connection to belonging. And so when you ask about what brings me joy in this work, it brings me joy to know that we're investing in educators that are doing this
mm,
work of investing in a generation of students, because we know that when students have one caring adult where they feel valued, seen, heard, and known, their life outcomes there that actually acts as a
yeah.
protective
Yeah.
barrier against stress and anxiety. And so what brings me joy is to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with these educators who are
Mm,
doing this meaningful work, where we're not just forming students, we're helping form human beings all at the same
mm.
time.
I think that's so important, Joy, and that's inspiring that that's your why and what's giving you hope, especially with the lens in which you look at serving schools across the nation and abroad. Um, we talk on this podcast often the chaos wheel, and that it's really important for us as educators and educational leaders to really just kind of calm our environments,
Mhm.
so that we can be that safe space for our students. And so I think you hit it on the head. And I love the fact of you standing shoulder to shoulder. I've seen you with school educators and leaders, and you're the perfect person for that. When you talk about Chicago and Michigan, my hometown, and I know you serve all over. Um, over the last 9 weeks, 10 weeks, has there been a moment where an educator or school community that has stayed with you, that as you're walking into the beginning of the school year, that conversation is like, okay, I need to remember this as the thread throughout my school year this year?
Mhm. One thing that has stuck with me, this is actually from the Archdiocese of Chicago. They have a belonging initiative, and so belonging is a
Oh,
priority for them. They're
really?
actually collecting
Okay.
data on it and making that data actionable. And so, what was sticky for me that I've thought about many times, um, since connecting with one particular school is some feedback from students was how important it was for them to be noticed when they were
Mm,
gone, when they are sick, when they didn't show up, when they were gone on vacation, like whatever good, bad, or ugly happened, but that they were missing. And so, what this particular school was talking about is norming what they do when someone doesn't show up. And so, when a
okay.
student doesn't show up in the classroom, what action do they take as a teacher? Do they send an email to the parent? Um, when the student returns back, are they intentional to say, you were missed?
Yeah.
Are you okay? What happened? Like great intentionality, and then creating space for the students to recognize when other students are missing. So that habit and intentionality of knowing every student by name, to
Mhm.
notice who has gone quiet in the room or who's gone, like to create a culture where when someone is missing, we actually notice it. And that's part
Mm,
of valuing a person. And so that was really sticky. And I thought, wow, that's something that we can all do as
yes.
educators to notice who's missing from the room. And it applies to our students. And you and I do a lot of work with also teachers. Teachers, when teachers are missing,
Yeah.
they need to know that their presence was missed, their voice was missed, what they
Yeah.
bring to the table was actually missed. And so that was my sticky moment.
Wow.
And it gives me hope that our teachers are doing this innovative, and our dioceses and school networks are doing this intentional work of creating culture and belonging on their school
Mm.
campuses.
I love that. I want to circle back on that with our Oxford research team on the Belonging Initiative. That's powerful. I got goosebumps when you talked about the students wanting to know that they were missed. I can see, I mean, there's a lot of research out there, the Gen Z stare, and there's some
Hmm.
good research coming out of Australia right now. But I think when we create that norm, we create that framework, we're also allowing the students to kind of, when we talk about community, to set their feet down and know that they matter.
Hmm. Yep.
And that's powerful, especially when you talked about we have these connections on technology and on social media and Wi-Fi and gaming and all of those, no Wi-Fi, we use Wi-Fi for gaming, etc. But having those students know that you weren't here yesterday, but boy, we missed you. And that's, I just think that's so powerful. And I can just see how that could really strengthen that sense of belonging, especially for those students who are quiet
Hmm.
and who
Yeah.
might not vocalize much. Like that could be really powerful. Mm, thank you for sharing that. That's going to be a thread in my mind too now. I'm going to take your little sticky moment. When we talk about joy and belonging, one of the things I appreciate about your work specifically is the emphasis that you have in helping people feel known, valued, and connected. We use the word belonging frequently in education,
Hmm.
but belonging is much more than simply being included or physically present in a community. So, Joy, when we talk about authentic belonging, what does it look and feel like in a healthy school community? And what connection do you see between belonging and joy?
Hmm. I think that's a great question. First of all, I think belonging encompasses a lot of different factors. And I would argue, this would be my case that I would argue that belonging is a precursor to joy. And there's a lot of
Mm,
research that backs that. I think Harvard has the longest longitudinal study that has been done on adult happiness and
mm.
joy. And when they ask the question, or when they're trying to find what predispose, like what is the word I'm looking for? A predictor. What is
Yeah, yeah.
the
This is
strongest
a safe space. This is where we get to be real.
yeah. What is the strongest predictor of happiness and longevity of life? And you would think, especially when use the word longevity, you would think that it would be like, are you exercising? Are you
Yeah.
don't smoke, you don't drink, like all these things, you have low cholesterol, like, but
Mm,
actually the strongest predictor for longevity of life and happiness is attached to community and connection. So I know we're going to
mm,
come back to this in the conversation that the stronger their connections, the longer they live and the more joy that they experience. And so when you think about that, belonging is a precursor to joy.
mm,
It is a necessity for community and for connection. And when I think about what is the definition of belonging, I think I'm known, I'm valued, I'm connected. I have a place here. And it's those concepts. And then when we take that and layer that on to the school environment, I see two key factors to belonging. One being the teacher to student, where students are asking the question, is there an adult who knows me, who
mm.
sees me, who believes in me? And I think that belief, to know that you have somebody who believes in you, even when maybe you don't believe in
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Also having someone notice them. So that's the teacher to student relationship that builds that foundation of belonging. And
Mm,
that one is actually, I think, easier to move because it just requires one caring teacher to do the work of noticing, seeing, valuing, knowing a student by name, spending time with them. So that one is easier to move because you have one adult and you have students. The second core piece of belonging when we look at school campuses is peer to peer. And
mm.
so this is where students are asking the question, do I have people? Is
Yeah.
there someone I can sit with at lunch or play
Yeah.
with at recess? Am I invited in Do other students value me? Do they notice when I'm not here? Do I matter? And so what we know is that students actually need both. They need the
Mhm.
teacher belonging, that caring adult, and they need peer-to-peer. And so when we think about school hesitation, when we think about anxiety, when we think about students learning, belonging is foundational to learning. And it is foundational to students experiencing joy because when students come to school and they have someone to play with and sit at lunch, those are those sparks of joy when they feel safe in the classroom to ask a question or fail and not to be picked on or called out or shamed, where it's a safe learning environment. Students are more able to actually engage in the learning process. And I think that, and the reason is because I think there's more joy in learning because it's happening in relationship and in community, which Bandura did a whole bunch of research on why and how we learn. And I think it's connected to belonging, which is a spark for joy.
I love that. And we're gonna when my book comes out, The Four Pillars of Joy for Catholic Educators, a pocket retreat, you're gonna laugh because now I don't talk about belonging specifically, but we're called by name, right? And
Yeah.
that's our belonging. And so
Yep.
that is part of the journey to get to joy when I think about through our faith thread. So this is very powerful. Um, I love that you said belonging is essential in experiencing a spark of joy for our students. I love that. And I would say that when we look at teacher retention, because we play a little
Mhm.
bit in that
Mhm.
research,
Mhm.
I would say for the school leaders, and I know many of them have sent me little comments on this podcast of the little nuggets that they're taking away from amazing guests like you coming to give them uh, feedback and tools for their toolbox is that it's important for us, just like we're creating those environments for our students, to create those norms for our teachers and
Mhm.
not just our teachers, but our faculty and staff. I'm a big proponent of using the word team. And
Mhm.
the research supports that instead of the divisiveness that faculty and staff can sometimes occur on a school campus. But I think that it's important for us to have the conversation now. Our school years are just starting. How are we as an administrative team or as a diocesan team, a school system team lead, going to make sure that we're noticing our principals, are
Mhm.
going to notice our teachers, our faculty, staff when the custodian doesn't come and we all miss him or her. So I just think it's important to have the conversation. And sometimes we do get so caught up in our meetings, our monthly meetings, our bi-monthly meetings, that we're not breaking open these really relevant conversations, but they matter in
Mhm.
creating a positive school culture. So that leads right into the power of community. So much of education focuses on what an individual teacher or leader should do better. And we love our educators. We love our educational leaders. So I know we're not in that group.
Mhm.
They work hard. They're heroes. They're choosing. They could do anything, but they're choosing education to make a difference in the life of the children and the parents placed in their care. But your work with Frenzy reminds us that schools are communities. I was reading, you've got some really great data on your Frenzy website and the competency climate connection, um, where students develop the skills, the climate develops with them when we're talking about belonging. So when we're looking at that, why does community matter so much? You talked a little bit about that, particularly for educators and who they are increasingly giving examples in the classroom. And if you have a couple of wisdom nuggets for the Mary or Nancy out there listening on their walk tonight, um, what would be something that they could do to begin tomorrow,
Mhm.
to help create these environments?
So I think teachers have all the tools in their toolbox. What they need is time to
Mm,
process with intentionality. Um, when I think about teachers, they don't need one more thing to add to their plate because their plates are already really, really full.
Yes, very
And
good
so
point.
when I think about what teachers can do is that they can learn a child's story. And so they can actually, and we have some charts inside of Frenzy where they can track students by name so they can actually
Mhm.
schedule it out because if they have 20 students in the classroom, they can't get to 20 students in a day or even a week. But how can they intentionally learn each student's story? I was in Cadillac and I was asking the teacher, one in, and he was a stellar teacher and cares deeply about his students. I said, "You
Mm.
have a new classroom. Like, what is your new that you're doing?" And he said he's going to take the first 2 weeks and get to know every single student by name. So that I think those are two really basic things. And then we talked about, can you hear my dogs barking?
Nope, they're good. And dogs
Oh,
are
that's great.
welcome. I love dogs.
They are chatting away. Um, the one thing that I came to mind when we were creating resources for teachers is something that Pope Francis talked about. And I think this just anchors us in thought. And he was in St. Peter's Square. This is back in 2017. And he talked about the gospel passage of Matthew 22. And that's a passage that talks about um, they came to Jesus and said, "What is the greatest commandment?" And in there, the response was, "Well, you love God and you love your neighbor." And then Pope Francis reflected on this passage and he said, "We're created to love and be loved." And then he went one further step and he said, God's dream, and so he was talking about this is God's dream for us, is that we would know we are loved, that we would love him, and that we would love one another. And so when
Mm.
I think about what can a teacher do as they're starting out this school year, I think they start from that anchor point of how can I intentionally get to know each one of my students? Whether I put their names in a jar and pull one out, whether we have warm welcome tools and strategies. And again, this is for
Mm.
morning meeting times where they come in and students get to share in a safe space. And so they have different ways to help students get to know each other intentionally. And that is one thing I would really encourage teachers to do is they're creating space to get to know their students, but also create space and opportunity, quiet moments for students to learn about each other and to learn from each other because the teacher to student belonging is much easier to cultivate. The student to student belonging takes a lot more time. It's dependent not only on the climate, but on the culture. Do we
Mm.
have an environment that creates space for students get to know each other, to learn from each other, to have connection in that sense of belonging?
Mm. That's those are excellent uh examples of to really kind of get us thinking about how are we engaging our students and how are we opening up ourselves to them to create that environment. Um, I think most school leaders, Joy, would say that they want their school to be places of belonging, connection, and joy. But wanting the culture and intentionally building it can be two different things. And I think maybe sometimes it's taking that time. But what are one or two things a school leader or teacher could begin doing tomorrow to strengthen belonging and community? Outside of getting to know the names of the students, opening ourselves up, are there any kind of routines that you've seen to be really effective when you're serving schools across the nation that leaders can do and student teachers can do to create that community of belonging?
Mm. First of all, start with the adults in the room. So
Mm.
when we think about creating space for your teachers to get to know each other and from each other, I think it's really important. And so this is simply starting at staff meetings. Are you having, I'm going to use frenzy language, are you having engaging openers? We have low, medium, and high vulnerability points of connection for teachers. And so you want to start with low vulnerability. Like one of the regular tools we use for that is 5 photos back. And so
Mm,
teachers come into the room, everybody's mixing and mingling, we're ready to start a staff meeting. You take a 5 minute turn and talk where they open up their phones and they pull up 5 photos back, make sure they're appropriate photos, and then they share the story behind that photo. And what that does is it humanizes the teachers. Teachers often feel
mm,
like they're operating in silos, and this creates space for them to learn about each other, to learn from each other, just at the
mm,
start of the staff meeting. And then as the year goes, you have higher vulnerability questions or reflections or turn and talks like, what is a burden that you've been carrying? Or is there something that
mm,
an intention or a prayer that we can, prayer requests that come out? And so, again, you build that over time, but build in belonging and relational connections starting with your staff. Um, and on your campuses. And when I think of diocesan leaders, like as they bring the principals together, they do the same thing with their principals. They create
mhm,
opportunity, low, medium, and high vulnerability for principals to learn about each other and from each other. And that also trickles down to the students. When I think about what is foundational for belonging in students from the research and the work that we do within Frenzy, it is unified language. So in Frenzy, we have these catchphrases connected to scripture, and those are posted on the walls. They're things like we need each other, teamwork makes the dream work, love at all times. These are themes that come out each month. And schools can use different things, but that normed consistent language that the teachers use with the students, that when there's a discipline issue that happens out on the playground, for example, one of our catchphrases is watch my words.
mm,
When a principal was saying her middle school students were cussing out on the playground, she went back to watch my words and brought in this normed language where students had clear expectations and they understood how they fit into the community. And so that normed language, I think, is really
mm,
important for establishing belonging attached to clear expectations because boundaries create safety for students and expectations give that sense of
mm.
belonging and safety to students because we want our kids to feel safe when they're at school, which I think is really important for the student community. And the beauty with normed language is the teachers use it, the students use it, and it can transfer to the parents because the parents are the primary
Yeah,
educator of
yeah.
students. So, how do you engage them in the belonging process? And so, those are like some foundation. Start with the teachers, create some normed language and clear expectations to create boundaries and safety around belonging. Um, and then engage the families in the work as well.
I, thank you. I'm a huge proponent that words have power. And I also, when we look at teacher retention research, um, oftentimes teachers are choosing not to stay in their classroom more than a year, 2 years, because they haven't broken the code of their campus that they have were hired to serve. But what you just mentioned of creating that normed language and creating that time at a team meeting, faculty staff meeting for creating, belonging norms and language, uh, that I could see would also help a new teacher. They immediately know what the school stands for, how to operate within that campus. Um, and then I also could see how that would be such a benefit to parents. There's a lot of research post-COVID that our parents are just trying to get back,
Mhm.
resources and trying to get back into some steady norm routines with their children. Um, that could be powerful. That alone would be a great parent workshop.
Mhm.
So powerful. Okay, so when we think about the work ahead, I'm excited. You and I get to serve along Dr. Michael O'Connor, um, Anita Harkins Messling. There's a whole team joining us. Dr. Jim Rigg, Dr. Latanya White, Karina Lukowski. I could go on and on. Lindsay Rivas. We have put together an amazing dynamic research team who are dynamic in the roles that they serve across the nation. And so we have this privilege, you and I, to enter in another year of research and creating a manuscript focused on school culture with practical tools that can help school leaders build environments where educators thrive. So, one thing I continue to appreciate as I'm starting to look at the research and working with our research team is not only what does the literature tell us, that's important,
Mhm.
but we are also listening to educators and leaders in the field. So, as you think about the work ahead under that umbrella, and the work that we're doing in school culture. What are you most curious about? And what do you hope we learn as a research team that might ultimately help school leaders?
Mhm. I think a lot of research is asking the question of why are teachers leaving?
Mm,
And I think the research that we get to do collectively with this amazing group that you shared is really asking the question of why are teachers staying?
yes,
Because it's kind of like you can look at what's wrong or you can look at what's right and you can invest in the good. I have a tickle in my throat.
oh, no, you take the time that you need. That's powerful. It's about the lens we choose to use. Are we choosing to use a lens that sees the good immediately and then we capture that? Or the ahas of why people are choosing to leave? Yeah.
And I think in the research that we're doing is that belonging doesn't just begin with a program, it actually begins with people. So
Mm,
understanding the motivations of people who are teaching.
mm, that's powerful. Um, so Joy, I've been trying to leave listeners with something simple that they can carry into their own work as they're listening to this podcast
Uh-huh.
and enjoying the work series. So, if you could finish the sentence, we make room for belonging when we dot dot dot.
When we notice someone,
Mm,
when we learn their story, when we tell them that they're missed, when we invite them in, when we actually lean into them, when we see that
mm,
they're experiencing a hardship or a challenge. And I think when we remember, and this is going back to Pope Francis, but when we remember that none of us were created to do this work alone, that we're actually
mm.
designed and created for community. So this desire for connection and belonging is just a human, it's hardwired into us. And so that's those would be my words of encouragement.
Those are perfect. I I agree. I say that all the time. You know, we can do more together, and I believe that. I mean, I think Pope Francis was wise in saying we're not meant to do it alone. We are meant to do it together. So so I'll ask everyone listening, perhaps this is worth considering within your own community where you serve, that what is one thing that you can do this week to help another person feel seen, valued, and belonged? Joy, before we close, I want to ask a question I hope becomes a tradition in these conversations. Um, what is one good thing happening in education right now that you would hope that everyone would know about? Sometimes when we watch the nightly news or whatever news channel it is, or we get our thread on the search engine, our algorithm, sometimes we're not hearing the good in education. But if you were to like shout out, like our teachers and school leaders are doing amazing things, our district leaders are doing amazing things, what's one good thing happening in education right now that you wish more people knew about?
I wish more people knew and remembered how extraordinary educators are, how every
Mm,
single day
I love that.
they are doing really good work and
Yeah.
investing in a generation of students. And when I travel to schools across the country, as you said, and I meet teachers who are tired or having their own hardships or
Mm,
challenges, they're still showing up and loving and caring and investing in their students.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when I see principals who have this enormous responsibility and they stand at the front door and greet their students by name. And
Yeah.
when I think about the schools that have counselors who know the child that needs extra attention and they carve that out of their busy schedule. And
Mm.
so I just think we need to remember that our teachers are on the front line and they're doing extraordinary work. And when
Mm.
I think about the challenges in education, they are real, but at the same time, there are really good things that are happening. And so challenges and goodness actually can coexist at the same time.
Oh, yes. I almost said amen, but yes, I said it. Amen. Yes, exactly. Thank you for that. Oh, and I think that we cannot praise those who serve in education, regardless of the governance model, enough.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and the work you continue to do alongside educators, students, families, and school leaders. Um, like you, I agree, we're never meant to do this work alone. Perhaps some of the greatest joy in education is not found in the initiative. We don't need to add one more program, like you mentioned.
Yep.
Um, we don't need to maybe have one more accomplishment. Perhaps it's found in the people beside us, the
Hmm.
colleague who listens, the leader who notices, the teacher who encourages, the student who realizes, even when they come back from missing a day, that someone knows me here, and the community that communicates you matter and you belong. So thank you. Uh, thank you for joining us for another episode, Enjoying the Work. Joy, where can listeners go to find more resources on the topics that you shared today by the work you're doing with Frenzy?
First of all, Denise, thank you. This conversation brings me great joy that we're actually taking time out you are creating space to talk about how we can invest in teachers and educators across the country and invest in joy and belonging for them first so that they can invest in students. So thank you, Denise, for all you're doing. I cannot wait to read your book when it comes out. I'm cheering
Oh,
you on.
thank
Um,
you.
Very, very excited about that. Anyone who wants to find out more about Frenzy, please hop on our website, frenzy.co. If you want to see some of our research specifically around belonging on our schools and campuses, go to our impact reports on there. And
Mm,
if you want to connect, send me an email. I'd love to start a conversation. I'm a good listener and see if there's
yes,
any
you are.
way that we can support and cheer each other on in this work that we're doing. So, Frenzy's a nonprofit. We get to serve schools across the country in this meaningful work. My email is joy, Joy, at frenzy, the word friend with a zy.co. And again, our website is frenzy, friend.co. There's no M.
Oh, and enjoy. I will make sure to put that in I will put that in the little notes for this episode. You have such a busy schedule and you are just making such a difference for so many. I'm just honored to call you colleague and friend and that you would take time to share your wisdom with everyone listening or watching today. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I invite everyone listening to continue the conversation by asking yourself who might need to know today that they are seen, valued, and that they belong in your life. Until next time, keep looking for good opportunities to share the good because we know that when we do and we train our eyes to see the good, amazing things happen. We can certainly do more for the students, the teachers, and the parents placed in our care when we do it together. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.